called 911 to get out of a traffic stop. Let me start by saying, I know I was an idiot. The story I'm about to share is from my younger days, and I'm not proud of it, but it's something that happened, and it still makes me cringe whenever I think about it. So if you'd like to hear how a 19-year-old strapped-for-time me ended up calling 911 with a bogus story, just to avoid going to jail, well, here goes. This happened back in 1995, give or take. I was 19, driving a tiny beat-up economy car that was always on the verge of stalling. If you can picture a rickety compact car with mismatched hubcaps and a squeaky fan belt, you'll have the right mental image. I was perpetually broke, running late, and living paycheck to paycheck. That morning, I was on my way to work at a job that was super strict about lateness. The kind of place where 5 minutes late might as well be an hour. I was already walking the razor's edge with my boss. Another tardy could cost me my job. To make matters worse, I was practically coasting on fumes of gasoline. My old jalopy had a gas gauge that lived perpetually near A. I had just enough money to fill up a couple of gallons, but not enough time to do it earlier. My plan was to push on, roll through an intersection or two, and reach the gas station near my workplace. Then, hopefully, I'd still clock in on time. Just barely. The trouble began when I approached a stop sign for a right turn. Instead of coming to a full, deliberate stop, I pulled one of those rolling stops. You know, the kind where you slow down but never quite halt. My logic was flawed. I have no time, no gas. I'll just ease through and keep going. Next thing I knew, flashing red and blue lights lit up my rear view. My heart sank. In 1995, traffic tickets weren't the end of the world, but I definitely couldn't afford one. And more importantly, I also had a suspended license. More on that soon. I pulled over, cursing under my breath. The police officer, who I'll call Officer Smith, approached. I gave him my license, registration, and insurance card. Even as I handed them over, I felt a knot in my stomach. I was driving with a suspended license. There was an outstanding bench warrant for unpaid traffic tickets from months back. If the officer ran my name through the system, I'd likely be arrested. That meant being booked and released, possibly after hours of processing. No question I'd be super late for work, maybe even fired. The job was physically demanding and high turnover, with management that had little patience for excuses. This stop would be the final straw. Sure enough, the officer took my papers and walked back to his cruiser. My mind started racing. How can I get out of this? I felt desperate. That's when I remembered something from a phone salesman's pitch a couple of weeks earlier. You have to remember, in 1995, cell phones were not as ubiquitous as they are now. They were still somewhat new, bulky, and often analog. But I had just bought, or financed, a brand new digital phone from a company called VoiceStream, which, if I recall correctly, eventually became T-Mobile. The big selling point from the salesman was that these phones were digital, not old-school analog cellular, meaning the signal supposedly couldn't be triangulated or traced easily. He went on and on about how law enforcement or 911 dispatch wouldn't be able to figure out my exact location if I placed a call. At least not quickly. I didn't even care about that feature at the time, but in that moment, the memory popped into my head like a neon sign. They can't trace it if I call 911. I glanced at my gas gauge, thinking, I'm almost out of gas. I need to get to that station. Then I thought, wait, what if I distract the cop? A crazy idea took shape. I'll phone in a fake emergency. The cop will get called away. I'll slip out of here. Ridiculous. Unethical, probably illegal, but I was 19, panicking and not thinking about consequences beyond, don't get arrested. I waited until I saw Officer Smith in his cruiser, presumably running my ID. That's when I picked up my VoiceStream phone and dialed 911. The operator answered, 911. What's your emergency? My heart was pounding. How do I do this convincingly? So I stammered out a lie. I said, I just saw a man with a shotgun walk into the 7-Eleven on 4th Street. That 7-Eleven was about 2 blocks away, near the main intersection. I added details about how he looked. Dark jacket, maybe jeans, I don't know. He had the gun hidden, but I saw the barrel. Then I hung up abruptly, hoping they wouldn't call back. My hands shook as I ended the call. Maybe 30 seconds or so later, I saw Officer Smith fling open his cruiser door, dash to my car, thrust my paperwork at me, and say something like, okay, you're free to go. Come to a complete stop next time. He was breathless, obviously responding to the 911 dispatch about an armed suspect at the 7-Eleven. He peeled off, lights and sirens blazing, roaring down the street toward the store. My pulse roared in my ears. It worked. I had avoided a ticket, avoided jail, and the cop was gone. Or so I thought. I wasted no time starting my engine, praying it wouldn't stall, and pulled away. The tank was bone dry, but I made it a few hundred yards to the gas station, coughing and sputtering as I parked by the pump. My car died right there at the pump, but I'd arrived. I hopped out, feeling this twisted sense of triumph. I did it. I beat the system, or so the adrenaline told me. I filled up maybe $5 worth of gas, started the car, and headed to work. I was only about 5 minutes late, enough to get a dirty look from my boss, but not enough to lose my job. The rest of the shift, I felt that giddy mix of relief and fear, wondering if the police would track me down now. But part of me recalled the phone salesman's words, "Digital phones can't be traced the same way." That might have been hype, or maybe it was partially true for the technology of the time. Either way, no cops came knocking on my door that night. Of course, as the days passed, the moral weight sank in it. I just phoned in a fake armed robbery. That's a major felony in many jurisdictions. Misuse of 911, false reporting, interfering with law enforcement. If caught, I'd be in deeper trouble than a suspended license. Not only that, I potentially put innocent people at risk. The store might have gone into lockdown. Cops might have approached with guns drawn, terrifying staff or customers. What if a real tragedy happened because the cops expected an armed suspect? My stupidity could have ended far worse for random bystanders. Thinking about that still gives me shivers. At 19, my only focus was, don't go to jail. Don't lose your job. I was living paycheck to paycheck, dealing with a suspended license from prior traffic infractions I couldn't pay. Another arrest or hours in jail might have spelled the end of my job, which was my lifeline. On top of that, I was fueling the car on literal coins from the console. Life was precarious. No, in that anxious moment, I saw an opportunity and took it. It was reckless, selfish, and short-sighted, but that's not to say it was right or even excusable. As I got older, I recognized how one lie can spiral and how easily I could have been discovered. I thank whatever stroke of luck that no one was hurt in that fiasco. Because if the cops had realized it was a hoax, or if the 7-Eleven staff had pressed charges for the panic, my entire life might have derailed. I have no idea if the 7-Eleven ever reported confusion, or if the cops arrived to find nothing. Likely they realized fairly quickly there was no shotgun-wielding suspect. Possibly Officer Smith realized he'd been duped, or maybe he just chalked it up to a false alarm. I never found out. Part of me worried for weeks that the phone might ring, or an officer might show up at my door saying, "You placed that 911 call, didn't you?" But it never happened. Either they had no record, or they didn't prioritize investigating a non-evento. Here's an extra detail. I definitely had a suspended license. Because of that, if Officer Smith had run my name, he'd see I had a bench warrant for unpaid ticket seize. That means I would have been arrested on the spot, taken to booking, possibly out the next day or two. But 2 days in jail is all it would have taken to lose my job. That job was physically demanding, but it was all I had. And if I got fired, I might not have paid rent or bought groceries. So me calling 911 to create a fake emergency wasn't just about avoiding a ticket or a few minutes of scolding. It was about avoiding certain arrest. That ups the stakes significantly and partially explains my panic. Now, looking back, I realize how unbelievably reckless that call was. It's not just me who could have faced legal repercussions. I could have ignited a chain of events leading to someone else's harm. Police responding to a man with a shotgun can come in with guns drawn. If a random shopper or staffer made a sudden move, it could have ended in tragedy, all because I wanted to dodge a traffic charge. That's horrifying to think about. I also think about the possibility that the local PD might have cross-referenced phone records. Maybe they shrugged it off, given that this was 1995 and phone tracing technology was different. Digital signals, limited resources. Who knows? Possibly they did suspect it was me, but felt they had bigger fish to fry. In any case, I lucked out in not getting caught. Finally, morally, I realize how I manipulated the system. I wasted police resources, time, and attention. Officer Smith was probably disappointed or upset when he rushed to a scene that turned out to be nothing. The next time 911 got a real call about a suspect, Maybe he had doubts. I contributed to the cynicism cops might feel about certain emergency calls. That's not a small thing. After that day, I kept my job. I carefully paid off the outstanding tickets and got my license reinstated eventually. That was the last major traffic fiasco I had. The phone company, VoiceStream, eventually rebranded to T-Mobile. My phone soon became obsolete, replaced by a new model. Over time, I matured, realized how close I came to real trouble. As the years passed, I told a couple of close friends the story, usually as a cautionary tale of my dumbest moment in youth. Some thought it was funny. Others were horrified. For me, it's a mix of shame and relief. I got away with it, but that doesn't make it right. So, yeah, when I was 19, I lied to 911, claiming there was an armed robbery at a 7-Eleven. I did it to make the cop who pulled me over abandon my traffic stop, so I wouldn't go to jail on a bench warrant for my suspended license. The plan worked. He handed me my paperwork, told me to be more careful, and sped off. My old beater car limped to the gas station. I made it to work, and I kept my job. That's the short version. The long version is that I risked public safety, wasted police resources, and it's only dumb luck that no one got hurt. Would I do it again? Knowing what I know now? Absolutely not. At 19, panicking about a job and worried about going to jail, it felt like a quick fix. But grown-up me cringes at the memory, realizing how easily it could have ended in disaster. I suspect that's what youth is sometimes. Test driving stupid decisions until you realize how lucky you are not to be behind bars. So yes, I confess, I was an idiot, and I got away with something truly reckless. Not exactly a proud moment, but sometimes reality is stranger than fiction, and my younger self didn't have the foresight or moral compass to handle that traffic stop with any sanity. I guess this is my belated apology to that police department, to any staff at the 7-Eleven who might have been alarmed, and to the universe in general for pulling a stunt that could have ended much worse. I hope others read this and see it for the cautionary tale it is. One impulsive choice can have huge ramifications. I'm just thankful, all these years later, that no one got hurt and that I learned my lesson before something more serious happened.